What's up, Christy? One Love Fellowship for Followers of Christ. Sorry. I'm in bed trying to sleep, but I can't sleep because thoughts keep running through my head, and apparently I need to share them. I don't have my head covered right now. I normally do, but after I showered and washed my hair, I don't know, I just felt like my scalp needed to breathe. I haven't left my room, and I'm not going to be leaving my room, so it's probably fine if I don't have my head covered. I just know my scalp needed to breathe, and my skin is bad right now because I'm on, well, it's actually day 3 now of a dry fast, so hence all of the very, very dark and disgusting, hateful energy that part of me wants to apologize for, but then the other part of me is like, why should I apologize when I'm the one who has to experience it? Because although I do feel bad if any of it leaks out and ends up getting projected onto others, I mean, I genuinely do feel bad about that. I wouldn't be experiencing this energy if this energy didn't exist in this world, you know? Like, this energy wouldn't exist inside of my body if other people didn't project this energy onto me, and if other people didn't indulge in this type of energy. But whatever. So yeah, my skin is very, very flushed and red and itchy and dry, and I showered and I scrubbed really good and I washed my hair, but I still feel dirty and gross and my skin is crawling. It's so annoying, but I haven't done a proper dry fast in a minute, since before Lent really, and there was a point during Lent when I was guided to stop fasting, and at the time it felt legitimate. So anyway, I'm just doing what I have to for right now because I'm literally at my wit's end, and I wasn't sure, honestly, at this point what else to do to reset my energy. I need to go to the beach. I need to be near the ocean. I need to be near the ocean. But I'm just not sure about attempting to take that trip right now, financially speaking, because, you know, there's a madman at the helm who doesn't give a squat about people who actually have to live paycheck to paycheck, because he's never had to live paycheck to paycheck a day in his life. Like, he has no idea what that's even like. So, pro tip, if you want true democracy and if you want true fair representation and you know, leadership, then you might 333 you might want to consider electing people who actually know what it's like to have to live paycheck to paycheck, who have actually had to work regular jobs, who have actually had to live in their cars on the streets with other people, who've actually experienced homelessness before. Like, why do we expect our leaders to do anything to resolve homelessness in a humane way when none of them have ever actually experienced it, and they probably don't even know anyone who's experienced it? Do you know that hold on, not technically the first time, because it actually happened multiple times and I clawed my way back to having a roof over our heads, but one of the times that my child and I were homeless, and the neighbors next door here were looking after my child for me while I was working. And I remember the daughter, like, she was like, I just don't know what. Oh, her mom said something like, she said to me, I've never known anyone who was homeless before. Like, they were just, like, so sheltered. And, you know what I mean? Like, they grew up here. They lived here their whole lives. We didn't move here until I was 17. I grew up in the hood. So, you hate me because I'm cocky, but I'm cocky because I'm one of you. I don't look like one of you, so you discriminate against me too. But I promise you, this complexion doesn't get you anywhere when you're raised the way we are, and you know, aren't connected the way some of the elites are from birth. Just saying. It wasn't what I come on here to say, though. What was I thinking about that kept me awake and made me pull out my phone? I saw a thing. I feel like it was maybe like one of the like moment of Zen things or something. It was like just a little clip that they did on one of the satirical news shows that I watch sometimes. And it was from CNN. That guy, I don't know his name, but he does politics like he's doing sports or maybe even weather with the graphic, and he like moves his finger to like highlight. Anyway, that's apparently a style of reporting that people like, so that's the way they do it. He said that a lower percentage of people, how was it? Was it that a lower percentage, I think it was Donald Trump's approval rating is lower than the amount of people that believe in ghosts or telepathy. And the numbers were pretty low. It was like 36% or something. It was like a third of people believe in those things, which means that 2/3 of people probably think I'm completely insane. Whatever. I mean, of course, it seems insane. It definitely always seems insane until you actually experience it yourself. And that's why sometimes some of us have to actually experience these things ourselves, because we are very skeptical and logical by nature, and we don't necessarily buy into all that stuff. Like, we might believe in the possibility, we might say, well, it's possible, it's interesting, it's intriguing, let me study that. I want to learn more about it. But until you actually experience it yourself, there's always that part of you that's like, I don't know. I think people are just crazy. I get it. One of the things about my experience, see, I get this feeling like people expect me to be professional. Like I should behave more professionally. I should dress more professionally. I should present myself more professionally. And my whole thing is like, why? Why should I make an effort to be more professional when I don't get paid one single penny for anything that I contribute? And not that I want to take credit for the things that I contribute, because they're oftentimes concepts that have been projected onto me in order for me to process them. And because the way my brain works is very pure and innocent by default, so if an idea is presented to me, my brain was always looking for the most innocent explanation or execution of this concept. So if someone, say someone projected an idea into my mind, and at the time I'm unaware of how this works, and I think that it's my idea, or that it's an idea I got like from source, you know what I mean? And so now here I am mulling over this concept and trying to figure out, like, how can this be used for good? Because that's just how my brain works. And I mean, not for nothing, but that's how source works, right? To take anything and everything that the enemy intends for evil and use it for good. Except we're dealing with enemies who are trying to outsmart source, and so they are intentionally taking everything that source intends for good and trying to use it for evil, which is honestly just ridiculous, and I don't understand why they're still breathing. I don't mean to sound dark, but like, if you're going to make it your goal in life to attempt to outsmart source, then you really just need to drop dead already. Like, you really, really, really do just need to leave this plane altogether. I'm not saying you have to believe or worship or follow any sort of, doctrine, although personally I think it's a little naive and somewhat ignorant to think that you're so smart that there couldn't possibly be a cosmic intelligence that's smarter than you. Like, okay. But like to actively attempt to defy that, to attack that, to attempt to overpower, overshadow, or entirely eliminate that intelligence altogether is just, anyway. But when I see these concepts manifesting in physical reality that originally came through me, or at least came through me at some point prior to their physical manifestation in physical reality, and it almost feels like I was being used, to kind of justify or, permit, or maybe even try to get other people on board with some ideas that are actually really bad 11/11 ideas. One of them being the voucher thing, the school voucher thing. I do not want to take credit for this awful concept. But I do want to say that when this concept came through me, it wasn't what it is now. And what it is now is just a way for religious indoctrination factories, basically, which is what a lot of these private schools are, to take money away from public schools. And that was not that was not what the intention was at all. What the intention was, first of all, what I said was, before we do anything at all, we need to raise funding for public schools, because I learned at that time that our schools here in Knox County receive approximately $7,000 per student, which I find appalling. Just appalling. All the taxes. And this is the paltry little amount that we get. And granted, we don't pay state income tax, so our schools are fully federally funded. That whole small government thing is nonsense, because they claim they want small government, which is why we don't have a state income tax, but really what they want is to cater to big business. And they want to punish the impoverished. And that's how they do it, by not having a state income tax, which wouldn't affect people in poverty anyway. But it would create and generate more revenue for this state, so that we wouldn't be wholly dependent on the federal government, which is an extremely dangerous position to be in, especially right now. So my initial proposal was to first raise the funding to at least $10,000 per student, at least $10,000, because it is absurd to me that we would only be investing 4 figures per year per student. And then we wonder why our nation is failing. 1313. So first and foremost, at least a $3,000 increase, although I would argue for 12.5, because I still think that's an insanely low amount to be investing in our children. But even if we only raised it to $10,000 per student, that's $3,000 extra per student. And then the caveat of the proposal to allow parents to have the choice, and to also to allow teachers to have the choice, because that's part of it too. It had nothing to do with this religious indoctrination. It had nothing to do with taking money away from public schools. The intention was to create alternatives so that we truly have freedom of choice, so that students who maybe don't mesh well with the traditional environment can have options, and also teachers, individuals who enjoy teaching children who maybe also don't mesh well with the traditional structured environments, especially those that are state ran and force you to abide by whatever guidelines the current administration happen to feel like putting you under, because it changes with every president. It changes how we do things here in this country. There can't be any concept of uniform American values, because we're constantly swinging back and forth in this bipolar cluster fudge of corruption. But the intention was to create alternatives, small individual classes, even if an individual such as myself, for example, who has a passion for teaching and has a very specific and unique style that is maybe not for everyone, but for the students it works for, it works. And those same students might not thrive in a traditional classroom, but they might thrive in my classroom if I were in a position to have the freedom to be able to teach them within regulations and guidelines. Obviously, there would need to be some semblance of a uniform, like the basic things that we have to teach. You can't just, it can't just be a free-for-all, although technically by law, by our Constitution, it can. But I'm not suggesting that, because there are bad actors who will do horrible things with that. But there are students who do not learn as well through the traditional channels and the traditional setting. And they would learn more and thrive more if they were able to learn in a different type of setting, in a different type of environment. Maybe not a fixed setting. Maybe they were able to learn on location. Maybe they were able to use nature as a classroom. Maybe they were able to frequent museums and, national historic sites and like things, physical things that they can go and see and touch and smell and learn. The things that they have to sit in a classroom under harsh fluorescent lighting, reading from a book, and that's why the information doesn't stick and it doesn't translate. I think that there are better ways to teach our children. Not saying that public schools are not, I'm not saying we should defund public schools by any means, because I think public schools are extremely important. I think we should do more to have better education via the public school system. But that doesn't negate the fact that there are always going to be students and there are always going to be teachers who would benefit more from alternative methods. And that was my intention. Raising the funding first and foremost, and then maintaining that difference, that if the funding raised to 10,000, that's a 3,000 extra amount for each student, right? So then the caveat would be that if a parent chooses to pull their student out of public schools and use some sort of alternative method, be it a private school or be it, this other model of smaller individual, not necessarily for-profit education. I mean, obviously, if it's an individual teaching a class, they're going to need to sustain themselves and they're going to need to fund the education of the students. And so it makes sense that they would get paid for that. But no one needs to be making a profit. There don't need to be shareholders. That's ridiculous. If the schools got to retain the extra money while the student was allowed to take their $7,000 voucher and use it towards an alternative education, that wouldn't have necessarily been a bad thing. The concept was not the problem. The method of execution, the method of implementation was the problem, but they already knew how they wanted to implement it. They already, 1818, they already knew how they wanted to execute it, and they never had any intentions of doing it the intended way, doing it the right way, doing it the way that was actually going to benefit the students and the teachers and the communities, not the shareholders, not, the oligarchs, not the people who want to keep us all oppressed and under their thumb. So, needless to say, when I had that conversation in an email with someone, a few years ago, and then within a couple months' time started seeing it being discussed as policy. Politicians were talking about this, and then before you knew it, it was being implemented. Not the way I envisioned it, of course. It never is the way I envision it, because I envision it in a way that would be helpful to others. Just like the AI and the surveillance technology. I am not a fan of any of it, and right now, because of the way it's being utilized, I would rather if it just went away, all of it. However, to me, it could be used for good if we could eliminate all of the corruption and the evil. And this thing, and that's the other thing too, the thing with teachers having options is especially in public schools, like I said, you are bound by the current administration. You are bound by the politics of wherever you are. You are bound by so much that you can't comfortably teach in the manner that you would prefer to teach. And it's so silly because we see these nitpicky things, these dumb things like the Ten Commandments and the pride flag. It's ridiculous to be fighting over any of these things because, number one, I don't think it should matter. I think that a teacher should have jurisdiction over their classroom to a certain point, within reason, and they should be allowed to display, again, within reason, whatever they feel the need to display. Obviously, you don't want them plastering the walls with pornography. Obviously, you don't want them wallpapering the walls with pages from the Bible, because that would be a bit much. And it would blur the lines between what is appropriate and also what is constitutional in terms of the separation of church and state. However, I don't think an individual teacher choosing to put up a plaque, not being forced to by law, because that's ridiculous, but choosing of their own accord, 2112, to put up a plaque of the Ten Commandments in their classroom, not forcing the kids to recite the Ten Commandments, because that would be inappropriate, but just having the plaque there, because that's what makes them feel at home in their own classroom. And so that signals to the students in their classroom who that also speaks to. They recognize that, and they know, they feel safe, and they understand that this is a teacher who shares certain values and beliefs, and they can talk to them about certain things. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's also a good thing if a teacher wants to put up a pride flag. I don't think that they should be allowed to make the students pledge to it. That would be insane. But having it there, having it exist as a symbol, so that, again, any students who recognize that, who understand what that is, and who are on that wavelength, know this is a safe space, this is a safe teacher. I can talk to this adult about these things that maybe I can't talk to my parents about. And no, I'm not suggesting that teachers be inappropriate with students, but depending on the age of the individual student, at a certain point, you have to accept that sometimes they need adults that they can talk to about things that they can't talk to their parents about, or that their parents would not want them talking to anyone about, because it becomes a matter of, there is a point when the parents' rights end and the child's rights begin. And the older the child gets, the farther back the parents' rights go, and the more rights the child, the adolescent, the young adult begins to take on. And I mean, technically, we're all autonomous beings, we all have rights, but my point is, in terms of shielding children. Now, I always work with preschool children because I prefer that, but because they're preschool children, obviously there are limitations to what you would want to discuss with them. So I'm not going to have certain discussions with preschoolers that I might have with high schoolers. I just don't see the point of fighting over such frivolous things. Again, no, I don't think by law anyone should be required to place anything. But I also don't think that by law they should be banned if it is not truly offensive, if it is not truly inappropriate. And I don't think that the pride flag is inappropriate. First of all, your child wouldn't know to be uncomfortable around that if you didn't teach them that, or if you weren't allowing others outside of your home or even inside of your home to indoctrinate them towards that. First of all, they wouldn't have a problem with it. Now, if your child is curious and asks the question, I don't think there's anything wrong with a teacher, again, within reason and at an age-appropriate level, explaining to the students what that symbol means, because how else are they going to learn? And yes, they're going to have to learn, because queer people exist and we're not going anywhere. And honestly, you're only hurting yourselves when you you're only hurting yourselves when you shun us, or when you are uncomfortable with our existence because we're not going to cease to exist. Our community has been around forever, since the beginning of time, and it's only getting bolder and bigger in numbers. And, so it's like you don't have any, you're selling yourself short by being queerphobic. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that you need to fully embrace it. I'm not saying you yourself need to attempt to be gay. I'm saying that you shouldn't be so bothered by the mere existence of humans who are different from you that you would seek to eliminate them from existence. And you absolutely should not be so bothered by the mere existence of a rainbow flag in your line of vision that it would ruin your whole day. Because, trust me, I have to see Confederate flags randomly. I don't have to see them as much anymore because there aren't as many in this area. But in the neighborhood I was in before, because it was such a liberal area, there were those couple of outliers who felt the need to prominently display their Confederate flags. And not only that, but, it's Tennessee, so we have giant monstrosities along the interstate to make sure you don't forget, even though it's ridiculous because Tennessee itself was not a Confederate state. It was a split state. And actually, I think that it mostly leaned more Union, but whatever. But yeah, if you're that bothered by the existence of a flag in your line of vision, then you have big problems. Same with the Ten Commandments. It's one thing if you're an atheist or any other faith that for some reason is offended by the Ten Commandments. But, like, you shouldn't be so bothered by them just existing, hanging on the wall in your classroom, that it's a problem for you. And honestly, if it's that big of a problem for you, then that's a good indicator that maybe you need to switch classes and have a different teacher. Why can't they be themselves and express themselves accordingly so that they can let the students who do resonate with them know this is the class that you will resonate with? Why is that a problem? Why are you so hell-bent on forcing everyone else's kids to be educated exactly the same as your kids? That's so weird. It's freedom of choice. I am a big proponent of freedom of choice, even when I don't agree with the choices. And that's because free will is a divine gift. And if Source saw fit to give humans free will, then who am I to impose my will upon other humans? I can guide you. I can lead you. I can be an example for you. I can direct you to a better path. I can show you the error of your ways and why it is that the way you're behaving is not healthy and is not conducive to your highest and best good. I mean, I can do all of those things. But if I were to intentionally, actively attempt to impose my will upon you and control you, then that would be me attempting to take the reins from Source. And I don't understand how all of these people claim to be godly Christians and want to impose their will upon others when that is the least godly thing you can ever do. Because no true God, not Source for sure, maybe a lower entity, but not Source. No true God worth their salt has time to micromanage human activity. Okay? If God micromanaged human activity, there would be no way in hell humans would get away with the diabolical, disgusting shit that you get away with. I can just tell you that right now. 98% of my beef with God is that God doesn't just snuff you out the second you even have a thought to do one of these disgusting things. And instead of immediately rejecting that thought and being like, ugh, where did that come from? That's not my thought. Ew, please take this from me, God. That's disgusting. I don't ever even want to have a thought like that again. But instead you think, oh, that's an intriguing thought. That kind of turns me on. It makes me tingly in places that I don't understand. Maybe I should go act on this thought, even though it's disgusting because it's a thought about harming a child or whatever. Forcing yourself on someone sexually, whatever. I would be fine if literally the thought itself, just entertaining the thought in any manner other than disgust, horror, like trying to comprehend where that thought came from so that you don't have thoughts like that again. Like any other manner of entertaining such thoughts, any manner of indulging in such thoughts, any manner of even for a second considering on acting upon such thoughts, like I would be perfectly fine if literally just the thought alone was enough to take you out. But I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit stricter and harsher because I've been through too much and I've experienced too much and I've seen way too much. And humans are doing way, way, way too much. So yeah, it frustrates me. But God gave you free will. So to me, the important thing about being a leader is not to impose my will upon others. It is to see that the will of Source ultimately prevails, because the will of Source was to give humans freedom of choice within acceptable parameters, not intentionally leading them astray and intentionally attempting to pull them down to the absolute worst versions of themselves they could possibly ever become. That's not Source. That's a lower entity that you call God, but it is actually more of a demon. But to determine guidelines, acceptable guidelines. Again, I might not agree with the choices, but if we're not banning things and we're not making things mandatory, we're not strictly enforcing or forcing anything. We are saying this is the left extreme, this is the right extreme. They're not really extreme because extremism is the problem. But this is as far left as you can go. This is as far right as you can go. This is as far liberal as you can go. This is as far conservative as you can go, legally. And you can feel free to be as liberal or conservative within those parameters as you see fit, because it's between you and your Creator. If you choose not to do what's best for you, then the consequences will fall on you. And if the parameters include provisions to prevent harm, particularly to others, especially children and animals, and to the environment, then there's not really so much of an issue. I don't personally agree with consuming certain substances, although there are other substances that I personally feel were placed here intentionally by Source to be utilized as medication and spiritual communion. Those are my beliefs. Now, I do believe that part of the problem that we have as a species is attempting to control substances, so I'm not a huge fan of attempting to control substances. At least not to the point of complete banishment, because we know that banning them, prohibition, it doesn't work. They still exist. People still find a way to get them. In fact, they probably want them even more because you told them they can't have them. So now you've created this whole underbelly of corruption that fuels the global economy and allows all of this nonsense to continue, all because you wanted to outlaw a plant or components made from a plant or some chemicals that someone came up with in their basement chemistry lab. And I'm not too keen on that, but considering all of the man-made chemicals that someone came up with in a chemistry lab that you put in our food supply every single day, I hardly see where you have the moral high ground to sit here and say that someone who chooses to do heroin can't do heroin. And again, I personally don't condone the behavior. I've had a lot of people in my life that I cared about completely switch up because they got hooked on that stuff. So no, I'm not saying that you should do that. I don't even personally like the idea of it existing, but it does exist, and there are people who are going to choose to do it. And it would make more sense if we thoroughly and properly educated humans and thoroughly and properly studied the substances so that we could thoroughly and properly educate the humans. And then we leave it up to the adult, consenting, rational, no brainwashing, no mass mind control, no already substances imposed upon them to cause them to lower their inhibitions, none of that. But if a sane, rational human said, hey, you know what, I think I want to try heroin, there could be a way for that to happen that is the least harmful to all involved, including the individual who is choosing to shoot poison into their veins. And I'm not judging you, but that is the reality of it. Again, I'm not condoning the behaviors. I personally don't agree with them, and I personally would want to encourage people away from those behaviors. But that's not going to stop those behaviors from existing. And it's not your place to control the behavior of others. That's the problem, is humans are constantly wanting to control each other. I did want to modify human behavior, but not through any systems of control or manipulation or, deceitful tactics, not by subverting their free will, by genuinely being a positive influence and a positive example, by actually caring about them to the point that they would actually care about my opinion of them, and they would want to behave in a manner that, I don't want to say, I'm hearing pleases me because it's source talking through me, but that I would find respectable. Do you know what I mean? Like, I would prefer if humans willingly change their behavior for the better because they know it's what's best for them, and also because they love and respect their leadership as well as the source they came from. So much so that they know that our intentions are for their best and highest good. And so what we're guiding them towards is actually the better option, even though a less healthy option might be legally made available to them. It's just, there are so many things that I made the mistake of sharing through this supposedly private email platform that then were later twisted and implemented in such a way that it negated every positive outcome, every positive aspect of the concept was negated, and it was used completely to undermine and to do as much damage and as much harm as possible. And so, again, I mean, you may not believe in telepathy, that's fine. If you're not capable of telepathy, you likely won't believe in telepathy. But at some point in your life, if you ever have an experience where you experience telepathy, where you truly experience telepathy, you'll probably change your mind. But this was my experience, so for whatever that's worth, I don't know who this will help, or if it'll help anyone at all, but I hope it helps someone today. Just remember, you are loved. You are forgiven. You can be saved, no matter who you are, no matter where you are, no matter what you've done or what's been done to you, Donald Trump. I genuinely feel bad for you. I mean, I feel worse for your victims. All the people that are harmed by the policies you implement and how reckless you've been, and you just have no regard for the safety or well-being of the citizens of this nation, and it is very frustrating to watch. But as a human being, as someone's grandpa with obvious dementia, I feel bad for you. I truly do. I feel bad for all of you, for the karma that you're going to have to endure because of the choices you insist on continuing to make. And I really wish, I pray actually, that you would stop. Just stop. Just stop. Stop doing evil. Stop kowtowing to corruption. Find your spine, stand up tall, and say no more. No more. And yeah, there are going to be some people that are like, oh, well, you're suddenly singing a different tune now, because a lot of people give this crap feedback whenever a post comes up about Marjorie Taylor Greene talking about the death threats that she received, that her family received, that her son received. Because instead of having any empathy for her whatsoever, they only see the hypocrisy in how she behaved previously. And for me personally, that's just not how I process people at all. I don't forget what you've done. I don't forget what you've done. But when you actually show me evidence of changed behavior, when you finally start to experience the karma for how you have behaved, and it genuinely makes a change in you so that I can start to see some light coming back, and you seem to maybe actually be doing some soul searching and thinking about how your actions have affected others, because now you're seeing how those same actions are affecting you, like that genuinely does warm my heart. And I have a soft spot in my heart for people who can and do reform. Truly I do. But far too many of you seem to be hell-bent on attempting to get away with your crimes. Like, you've convinced yourself that you did nothing wrong, and that if you continue spewing the same narratives and doing the same things, like somehow it's just going to work out in your favor. It's not. It's not. It's not. It's not. Repent or die. That's the bottom line. I know I already did my spiel. I'm not going to do it again, but whoever you are, wherever you are, please know that you are loved. And I do apologize if I've caused you to feel not loved. If it's any consolation, it's because I feel so very, very, very unloved. Because sometimes I don't even feel loved by Source. And I definitely know I'm not loved by any humans. If there are any humans on this planet who actually love me, you got a funny way of showing it. Because I don't see it, I don't hear it, I don't feel it at all. At all, at all. So take that for what it is, and I hope you have a lovely Friday. Much love.